And welcome back to our live studio here in Tartu in this wonderful Delta building. And what's a lineup of people we have for this session? It's called Is Human Capital Leading the Charge of Just Holding the Line in Building Security and Resilience During Global Shocks? And before we dive into human capital, youth, what we see here really, and I'm sure that our viewers notice this, is that we have a lineup of people who work at memory institutions, first and foremost. And if you think about security and resilience in the global shocks, that doesn't strike you as the primary frontier. So could you please tell me very shortly, just as an opening, why memory institutions, museums, archives, libraries are important? Stace, shall we start with you and Maria? We'll go for you then.
Because, yes.
Stace,
Yes.
Stace, would you go first?
I think memory institutions are important because they hold the sum total of our cultural heritage. We are the curators and the preservationists of cultural heritage, and particularly when that cultural heritage is held in independent institutions and distributed, it makes that heritage safe from harm, and that cultural heritage is really incredibly important after conflict for rebuilding identity in place.
Maria, that sounds pretty distant. I mean, particularly probably for somebody who's just, I don't know, a couple of 100 meters away from the very line of the aggression and the, for now, thankfully, informational warfare. But what's your sentiment on the?
For me, it's our new reality. It's very sad, but this is a fact. And we, like I said, yes, we are already on this battlefield. And it's also our mission today to be in this situation and to react, because we can't be just silent. And it's about our work, about our mission, and the historical experience is very important for us.
Thank you. Eda, you're doing a wonderful job at Vabamu and with the Youth Academy and all of these. I mean, what in your point of view the relevance of memory institutions on the resilience building and deterrence?
So I would love to use Maria's words from her speech earlier, that museums are actually the guardians of memory and identity. But since I personally and our institution is dealing with the youth, so we're definitely looking into the future, and this is how we hand over this information that we have from the past. We have to keep telling the story. So obviously at Vabamu we're telling the story of the recent past, the recent occupations of Estonia. We have to keep telling this story, especially to youngsters who have been born to a free Estonia, who sometimes maybe take the freedom for granted. We have to tell them, keep telling them that we have to fight for the freedom and our freedoms every day. And we are simply looking into the future as we do it.
Thank you. Mike, you're the Vice Provost and University Librarian, Director of Academic Information Resources at the Stanford University. I mean, libraries are, we know their relevance and importance in the overall cultural picture. From the defense point of view, the work that you've done, particularly with Stace and with the ongoing visits to Estonia, what's your view on the library's role in deterrence?
Well, so like the other cultural heritage institutions, such as museums and archives, libraries contain records of the past, they record the present, and they look forward to the future. But it's important to realize that with regard to resilience, we plan for disasters. We plan to be ready should there be a catastrophe, whether it's a flood or a fire or, God help us, an invasion. And we work constantly to tune those plans, which involve positioning of material, contracts that are in place in order to bring in experts to help us recover from floods and fires and so forth. So this whole sense of what's happening today, what happened yesterday, and what we're ready for in the future is very important. It also must be said that these institutions don't broadcast and promote a single point of view, but they promote the idea of freedom, freedom which is not free, freedom which costs thought, action, and really a kind of mental resilience, so that we can interpret now with our values of today, but also look backwards and try to understand what drove positions and drove difficulties in previous times, going way back, and then how we might learn to converse together and interpret together, not to create a single point of view, but to understand the differing points of view of protagonists in one form or another.
One thing that we've come to kind of accustomed to in our modern societies in the Western Hemisphere is the fairly short time frames that we operate with. We work with annual kind of frameworks, maybe multi-annual frameworks, but one thing that the memory institutions do, and most certainly our adversaries do, is they operate across decades, if not hundreds and hundreds of years. The way I see memory institutions is really bridge the knowledge that was once there and once everybody knew to the present day and enable us to actually react to those. Because Maria, when you spoke about the information warfare, I mean, if you go back to the early 1900s, I mean, the tricks and interventions that have been used in the military landscape don't differ that much from the information warfare point of view. Is there something that we can learn how not to become these useful idiots in the battle for information?
Yes, of course. And the history is our teacher. But my question is, what is the history? Tomorrow, our day will be history. And yes, we live in historical moment. Unfortunately, just now we live in very dramatical and tragical historical moment. But it's really difficult to analyze it. But we had to do it, and we had to learn from the beginning of 20th century, and not only to analyze and to reflect current day and current situation.
Because the weaponization of citizenry, of youth, is something that I think resonates with all of us. Ede, you work with the young. I mean, this must be at the top of some of the agendas you're already.
Absolutely. So actually, currently, what we do at NOVA, which is the youth program for at Vabamu, the most popular museum class we are currently running is a class called Disinformation Strategies Through Generations. So based on what we have in our museum collections, what we see in our everyday lives, there are so many languages, so many examples we can take from the past that actually work exactly the same way today, although today we have technology to support us. Or, for example, if we talk about these regimes, how they operate, and obviously it's so much easier to do it these days when there's the internet, all the social media platforms, and especially for the youth, it's definitely, there's this abundance of information, and how do you distinguish between that information, whether it's false or correct, and how do you build this critical thinking to understand what could be false and what is true. And in cooperation with the Defense Ministry in Estonia, we built this course. It's also online, so basically every teacher can just access these materials in the classroom. We offer these materials both in Estonian and Russian, which is very important, especially since, as we all know, there's this reform finally happening in Estonian education system, that the Russian-speaking schools are now moving closer to the Estonian system, but still we have thousands and thousands of Russian-speaking students, and we just want to be there to help them out, because we know that sometimes they actually have 2 school days in one. So they, in the classrooms, they study in Estonian, and then they go home and do this all over in Russian, just to understand what they have been actually discussing in the classroom. And in order to not let them go and search for material online, we don't know where they might end up. So we actually offer all of these materials in Russian as well. And we actually do see that we have several visitors from Russia as well, which I think is a very good thing. So we can, this is our little warfare we are doing from our side. But this has been hugely popular. And another thing we're doing as a physical thing, we having these things we can learn from the past. We have the actual people who either grew up in Siberia, or were born in Siberia, grew up in Siberia, or were deported as little kids. They come and share their stories to the kids who go to school today. And this is just, the impact it makes is immense. So basically the school kids of today understand that, you know, their everyday worries are nothing as compared to what these people went through. And what I've seen and heard, these people are just so optimistic, and having gone through all these hardships and having seen what it takes to fight for your everyday, like very simple, basic freedoms, it just puts things into very different perspective.
And it's all the more relevant as this, as a warfare, deportation of young children
Still happening.
Still not only happens, but it's very weaved into the program here. Yeah. Interesting. Ede, you also you run also the study programs. I mean, it's not only that you teach the youth, but you also have studied, you know, their preferences and their attitudes very briefly.
So what we actually want.
There's hope, right? There's hope.
There's
and it's
definitely
not that,
hope.
You know, the middle-aged and the elderly tell them what to do, but we actually learn what are their preferences.
Exactly. So this is what actually we're aiming for at Vabamu, is not for us, the middle-aged ladies and gentlemen, telling the youth what they have to do, but to give them the agency that they actually do it for themselves. Or we sort of give them, you have to give them some sort of framework, and inside the framework, they're absolutely free to do whatever they want. And what we've seen at Vabamu, we've given them free, well, first of all, we are organizing a similar thing to the CDL that's currently going on here in Tartu and happening worldwide. We are organizing this Hüppelaud summer school, or springboard, so Estonian word Hüppelaud, sort of jumping in at the deep end. It's a week-long hackathon, basically. They come up with problems from their own life they want to solve, and then as they solve it for themselves, they also solve it for everyone else. And usually they come up with things that are actually very relevant for kids. And they actually, I personally learn a lot from them. And for example, this summer we had the summer school in Saaremaa, and we had a vibe coding workshop. So obviously, I'm assuming that maybe you have, but I'm sure maybe Mike, you haven't. Have you vibe coded before?
No.
I've coded this.
I'm sure you have. I personally hadn't before that workshop, and now I get to learn things from the youngsters. And the other thing that we let them, and now this Hüppelaud has been taken over by the alumni of this. It has been happening for 10 years now, and now I'm
it's
glad.
Becoming self-sustainable.
Exactly.
Cycle.
So it's a spin-off. We can call it a spin-off. And another thing, there's this active group of youngsters. With youngsters, of course, there tends to be the issue that they tend to get older, graduate their high school, go study abroad, and simply disappear from our vision. But then again, other youngsters come along. But there's this very active group of youngsters who have, there are actually 2 groups of youngsters, and one of them is organizing this sort of environmental events, because obviously this topic of environment is very important for youngsters today. And the other group is somewhat more political. They have been organizing these events of sort of demo elections. So, for example, last year, just the day before the US presidential elections, we had our own US presidential election at Vabamu. And the result was very different from the real result. And I can tell you that they had even programmed the map of the US. So each student who arrived at Vabamu was allocated into one state in the US. So they all got to vote as they do in the US. So first of all, it was just an introduction to the voting system in the US, which is very complicated, of course. And then just to see how different the result was. So obviously...
was it a landslide?
It was a landslide.
Yeah.
And the map was blue.
Yes.
Do you want to comment on that, Stan?
Your lips to God's ears, yeah.
But then this year, ahead of Estonia's local elections, we had there was a sort of a political debate with the real Estonian politicians actually having a really nice debate with all the major political parties present. And then the students got to vote. So who would they vote for from this debate, as well as from their actual constituencies, who could they vote for? And again, the result was very different from what was the real result the next day. So this is how we see that we get to, and what we see from the real results, that youngsters tend to prefer completely different political parties as the older people. And this is how we try to get the youngsters to vote, that don't let the old people make the choice for you, as happened with the Brexit in the UK, for example. So the young people unfortunately are the ones who have to live with a choice made by the old people. So we just want to give them the agency of sort of taking it into their own hands. And we do see, coming back to your original question, that I would definitely say there's a lot of hope.
So it's actually much more tangible working with the youth, as much as there is working with memory, because it will have really tangible impact the way you run a society during the time of severe shocks. One of the features, Mike, you have been engaged with CDL program in building the economic ties to this society with US. Is that something that contributes to the same stream of thought, how you basically run a more secure society with more economic ties, with more people engaged, with better kind of memory background underneath?
So the promise of what goes on at CDL is one thing. The promise that what goes on at the great and small universities and colleges, wherever they may be in the world where disinformation is not prominent, is remarkable. However, the big point is that there's a kind of presentation and then challenge. There are opportunities to take advice or not. There are opportunities to present evidence or not, and to compare presentations, responses, sources of evidence and insight, and to make possible the legitimacy of disagreements. It's not against a system or a scheme to be critical. It actually helps us improve our lives, our society, our memories, and our institutions. Terribly, terribly important that is the case. So I think one of the great aspects of CDL is its very challenge to the startups through the mentors, lots of mentors from various perspectives and experiences, and how they take advantage or not of the advice that's being given to them and the questions that are being asked of them. It improves their presentations for raising funds to continue their business or to improve their business. On the other hand, particularly at the universities and colleges, there's an opportunity always for critical judgment to be improved and for debates to occur and for improvement in systems, but without demanding adherence to a single system. It's a very rich environment we live in, rich in the sense that the possibilities are all there, but we have to learn to be comfortable with dialogue. We have to be comfortable with conversation. We have to be comfortable with different points of view while still adhering to the fundaments, the basic principles of our civilizations and our societies. And that's why the rule of law is so very, very important. It permits us to be free, but also permits us to value our society, its attainments, its history, and how to understand critically our histories behind us and look to a better future. That's what education is about, but that's also what dreaming is about. And I think helping the kids dream is a big deal.
I'm just wondering whether we've managed to leave some educational gaps in the present day politicians being in charge, violating the very kind of foundational questions about the rule of law, or maybe not violating, by challenging them to the degree that is really shaking the current Western hemispheric political orders to their very foundation, and therefore kind of, challenging the otherwise kind of frail or fragile balance structure, the power balance in the outskirts of the European civilization or the Western way of living. In any event, I think security is a function of connections. I mean, this is something that you basically say, Stace. I mean, if we started off with the memory, we went to the youth and the kind of corporate ties. In your presentation, what really was fascinating is the connection of research that is made both by the public sector, the universities, not necessarily public universities, but universities, and the corporate sector. If you were to bring those ties here, if you were strengthening those ties here, would that strengthen the resolve and the resilience and the levels of security?
That's an interesting question. Yes, absolutely. I think there are things that the private sector can do much faster, much more efficiently, and at a faster pace than the private sector or the public sector can do. And so those public and private partnerships are critical, and in particular, university and private partnerships are critical. At Stanford, we have really strong strategic relationships with companies like Google and Esri, the big mapping company that's been at it for 40 years, and the new mapping companies like Planet.com and Umbra and others. And they are innovating much, much faster than the public sector can in spaces like Earth observation and these technologies that can identify things, dynamics and objects and phenomena with higher and higher clarity and resolution on the surface of the Earth. And what we at universities have as a resource to make use of that is again, youth. That's the most important thing. I was just talking with some of your students out in the hallway, and their question was: Is it important to have access for students to have access to these kinds of resources? And it's absolutely critical. And the reason it's critical is because they look at the world in a way that we cannot. I'm the father of 3 teenagers, and so I know one thing beyond anything about young people, and that is that they are resistant to authority and authoritarianism. And that is a critical skill right now, questioning authority at every turn and making the world that they want. That's the most important point. They have the most skin in the game. They are the ones who are going to have to carry on for much longer than we will. And so it's very critical to have those partnerships that direct those innovations and innovative resources and the raw materials for innovation into young people's hands, because they're idea machines.
So let me point something out. The truth is that in our day-to-day lives, we may have some attitude or critical judgments about politicians, say. But the point is, in free societies, we get to vote on those people. They may have some big ideas. They may come to their parliaments and their offices with certain ideas, certain things they'd like to get done, and that's fine. It's actually very good, especially if they've done their homework. But if they haven't, and they're not responsive to their constituencies, we vote them out. That's different than a society where nobody gets voted out, and there is a hierarchy of individuals who are more or less authoritarian, telling people what to think, how to think, what not to think, and so forth. So it takes a little more time to bring these ideas to fruition through the political process, but there are other marketplaces, and the universities are another marketplaces. The development of new ideas in a corporation is a different marketplace. New companies are in a different marketplace, and those marketplaces are really difficult in the sense that they are quite critical. And the people who are voting on them are the people who buy or do not buy whatever the product or the service is. So there are a bunch of these machines that are working, these social machines, and understanding their relationships to the social body, the citizenry, the people that actually end up either buying or not buying a product or service, or the people that elect or do not elect a politician to a role, are key figures in this modification, this dynamic balance that we all live in. And it's important to realize that it is a dynamic balance on the one hand, and on the other hand, it is not a static balance. It is not dependent upon a single system or a single person or a single community of, say, oligarchs. It's quite important that it's a vivid, active, critical environment where conversations are important. Conversations, not shooting, not violence, but actual interplay among minds.
And also the connections, I think, what we've learned from Vabamu folks in the close connection to Stanford community and already the engagement. Maybe, Maria, this is something that we could tap on while these folks are here. We should, run by details and get the collaborations going with the Narva Museum as well, because although small in size, the vicinity to the eastern flank of the NATO border probably counts as a very high value add to such collaborations. So this is something that.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
What would be your reaction to that?
Yes, we will discuss.
Absolutely.
Because I think the pattern that Ede has with her team established with Vabamu is something that we can follow clearly here.
So that was exactly what I was going to say. What Stace was referencing to the public-private cooperation, and also what I strongly agree with what Mike said about this dialogue or discussion. That's very important. But being a private museum, so in Estonia we pride ourselves with all our startups and the innovation, and we have most startups per capita. But also the innovation can come from the cultural sector, and what we discussed with Mike earlier in the dinner lunch table, that we should really empower that sector. As well, maybe in this cooperation, but definitely as we are already working hard on the Ida-Viru or the eastern side of Estonia. So actually, especially with the Ministry of Defense, obviously being very interested in funding all these initiatives that take place in the Ida-Viru vicinity, and also the local, we could call them the old economy businesses. For example, VKG is the local mining company that we are now cooperating with, and I can totally see how we could.
Yes, actually, your supervisory board of Vabamu visited us this summer.
Yeah,
and we also, for example, Narva Museum is a foundation. That means that we have to honors the state and the local authorities, and local politicians, and it's also about balance. Okay, balance. It's not about a narrow political system, but yes, yes, we need collaboration with private cultural institutions, and we have actually we have very interesting material for your master classes and workshops. Yes, let's do.
This is how cooperation works in Estonia. You just have to go abroad for a
yes.
while to meet your neighbor.
Exactly, and this is partly the purpose of such panel like this as well. I mean, what's a clear commonality here in this panel, ladies and gentlemen, is these people and their institutions have unshackled themselves from their traditional roles. Museum traditionally doesn't do either what you do as a museum. Mike, a library traditionally doesn't do, or Stace, I mean, don't do what you guys do. And this is the modernization, adaptation that is ever more so required from the kinds of institutions. And I would only provoke you with last final question to all four of you, very, very quickly. If you were to challenge a university how to unshackle itself from its legacy and how to contribute to the kinds of work that you do in a couple of sentences, what that would be. Mike, do you want to start?
Well, I think the most important thing that we've done at Stanford over the long run, and I would say particularly the last 30-some years, but before that as well, is to make sure that we're bringing in the libraries material that provokes discussion, provokes research, makes possible comparative analyses, and what amounts to an intellectual argument on all sides of all disciplines. And we also bring new methodologies, and particularly digitization and the network communications that we engage in, our partnerships with the likes of folks here in Estonia and Tartu, very important, because it's a dialogue of civilization that makes the big difference. And that is the future for us as well.
Ede?
My quick response is actually on the back side of my computer here. It's called Coding School.
Public-private partnerships.
Well, exactly. And how
something that we are really afraid of this country, and we need to explore them more. As John Rendon says in the opening panel of this day.
I missed that, unfortunately. But so new coding school, just I think we have to make the academy operate much faster, to react to what's going on in the real world much faster. And I hope these initiatives can help do that.
Thank you. Stace?
I think building on what Mike said, developing the technologies to not only preserve and curate the cultural heritage of the world, but push it back out. Push it, you know, one of the things I love about Stanford is we're not, the Stanford Libraries, is we're not just a library, we're a media provider. We work in technologies that make it possible to share the cultural heritage and the materials that we collect with the entire world, IIIF and other technologies that make it really seamless to do these things. And I think that's one of the really incredibly valuable parts of what Stanford Libraries does, is they bring these technologies, they give them away, and they let other people share their own cultural heritage. And hopefully at some point, it will just be ubiquitous. The world's cultural heritage will be the world's cultural heritage.
Thank you, Stace. Maria?
Cooperation, support, practice. Empiric experience, it's about academic organization, but we live just now here, and we have a lot of practical examples to analyze, to reflect. Yes, and I'm not sure that I'm answered, but I agree with my colleagues.
You have perfectly. Thank you very much. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to conclude this panel. We have Mike Keller of Stanford Library with us, Ede Shangtamgivi from Vabamu Initiative and Nova Programs, Stace Maples from Geospatial Services Center at the moment, Maria, with a fantastic personal story, a true encouragement and true inspiration to all of us. It will conclude here, and we go for a short break. Thank you.